Hi everyone, I'm here again with the new cosmetic I bought from the item shop, and I'm sure this looks very familiar to many of you. Um, Listen, so I get it. This format of video, this tier list video, this killer strength tier list, these are my most popular videos. So to a lot of you, this may just seem like I'm trying to milk out views, but whether this gets views or not, I really am just not happy with the first two tier lists. The first one I posted, it was a bit unprofessional. It was sloppy. There are some killers I hadn't really tested. There was a bit of info I was missing from certain killers, and overall, it seemed like not many people really liked it. And then I posted basically just this, but I didn't explain anything. I posted a second video with the format of the tier list, and all I did was I updated my thoughts on two killers, and then I talked about two other killers for like 30 minutes because of one comment. This upset one person in particular, and I had already wanted to just outright delete those two videos and re-record them. So I'm going to leave them on my channel, but this is going to be the tier list. This is going to be the video, and I'm going to try my best to explain every killer as best as I can. Some won't be as in-depth, but for the most part, most of them will. So if I don't explain the killer that you wanted to know about quite as well as some other ones, I'm sorry. I'm trying my best. And as far as this video, this will be the last video. Just take my word for it. This will be the last video that I post about a killer strength tier list, specifically killer strength with, for the next like few patches. I won't do another one until we have like maybe 3 or more killers. So again, I know it may just seem like I'm trying to milk this out. I'm sorry. I wanna fix it and make it as good as I can. So let's start. I'm gonna start from top to bottom as I did before with my first video. I'm gonna try to reassess every killer. So let's start. As you guys can see, Nurse is at the top of S tier. She's been the best killer in the game for a very long time, and she will probably continue to be for many years. I really shouldn't have to convince many people why she's the best, so I'll just simply cover her power. Her power just lets her teleport through obstacles. It lets her ignore windows, pallets, it lets her ignore all of the elements that survivors have to loop. So she could teleport and hit survivors anywhere on the map. If a nurse plays perfectly, then she always has the upper hand. She is probably the only killer in the game, besides Blight, that doesn't start the game out losing. Because generally speaking, when a killer starts the match, they start out losing. Because they have no pressure, no nothing. This doesn't apply to Nurse. The only way to really delay a Nurse is to run around, maybe try and outspace her, to try and take her away from the objective. You could I guess try and like juke her and just make her miss. But a lot of the time, a good nurse is not going to fall for many of the things you do. Other than that, you can break line of sight and maybe delay her a little bit, but that's it. And she's received so many nerfs. I don't think she's ever been buffed, like ever. She's only received nerfs since she's come out, and she's still the top of the list. Her most recent balance patch is that her M1s don't work off of after blinking anymore. Excuse me. So after she blinks and she hits you, that counts as a power attack. It's not a regular attack. So you can no longer apply instant on perks. You can no longer apply Save Those for Last or Sloppy Butcher or anything like that. But and her add-ons also got nerfed, but she still has strong add-ons. She still has an add-on to increase her lunge. She still has an add-on to apply Mangled, as if it were just Sloppy Butcher, and she now has an add-on. Excuse me. She still has ranged add-ons, albeit worse than they were before. And she can honestly, like, she works just incredibly well with perks like Nowhere to Hide, because Nowhere to Hide aura reading effect carries with the killer rather than the gen that you kick. So she works really well with that. She works well with Lethal Pursuer, Barbecue, just all info, and honestly, she worked really well with Ultimate Weapon, but that perk is getting nerfed, and even still, she's gonna still be at the top. Yeah, that's it. Next we have Blight. So Blight is on my first tier list, I had two other killers in S tier. Blight, in my opinion, is next to Nurse. They're the only killers in S tier. S tier, in my opinion, in Dead by Daylight context, is they are just broken. They are just downright broken and have very little counterplay. Shit, I don't even know where to start. So, like, Blight, in the next update, is getting... He's getting a couple of add-on changes, but they're getting, like, slightly nerfed. Excuse me. So, before, he was incredibly powerful. He had so many busted add-ons. He had probably more S-tier add-ons than any other killer, and those have been constantly getting nerfed in the past, like, you know, in the past recent time. And they're still strong. Let's just start with his power. So beyond Blight still having strong add-ons, he has a mobility power. It lets him break walls, pallets, and it has a very short cooldown, being like 10 seconds, give or take. And the power itself has a very short cooldown animation. So like when you hit or miss, you don't get punished that badly. And even when your power is on cooldown, he's a 115 movement speed killer. So even without his power, he can still chase survivors just fine. On top of his mobility, it's a bit of an anti-loot power. So as of the current patch of DBD, as at the time of recording this video, there are like two main ways to chase survivors. There's the bumping way to play it, where you'll be around a pallet, you'll bump once, bump again, and you'll just eventually outspeed the survivor. They'll probably make a mistake and you just hit them. And then there's hug teching. So hug teching is where you kind of get next to the wall, and instead of bumping off of it, you slide, and it lets you get around corners and hit them. So in the next update, his collision's getting changed a little bit. I did not test it very much because the PTB we just had was awful, so I'm not entirely sure how much different hug teching will be. As far as I'm aware, even if it gets removed, Blight will still be strong. It'll still be an anti-loot power. He'll still have his incredible mobility. He'll still have everything. Like shit. I don't even. Let's talk about his add-ons. So before he had his add-on change, he had the iridescent, the compound 33 or 31. Jesus, I think it's compound 33, the iridescent add-on. It slowed down survivors, and it was the fastest way to just shred through pallets. It got changed to where when you bump once, and then you rush again and bump twice, and you rush again and bump 3 times, you have more turn rate. And then he used to have an iridescent blight tag that would make it to where you could instant on survivors when you use all your rushes. And then you had your speed add-ons, and you had the alchemist ring, which would recover all your tokens without any sort of cooldown. You had several add-ons. Those all got changed, but now his iridescent blight tag is probably his best add-on. This makes it to where it reduces your rushes from 5 to 3, which is not that big of a deal because your rushes recover extremely fast. And every single, like all of your rush movement speed is just increased by 20% flat out. This is so strong. The downside is barely anything, and you still have in the next. I don't know if it's currently or if it's the next update. I think it's the next. But his yellow add-on, the papers or whatever add-on, that reduces the cooldown of your rushes by 0.33 seconds. It used to have a downside where it would reduce your rushes to 4. That downside is being taken away. And the Blighted Crow and Blighted Rat, which used to give 6% movement speed per rush. Like, every time you rush, you get 6% faster, 6%. And then with the Rat, you get 4%, 4%. Now it's 3% and 2%, and they're still incredibly strong. So he still has, even without his busted add-ons, even without his hug tech, he still has incredible mobility. He still has incredible utility. He still has really strong add-ons, and his power can still be used in chase. The things to note, despite all of these things, is maybe there is some ways to counter Blight. You can body block against Blight pretty... well, not easily, but you can body block against him more than some other killers, even some that are lower on the list. Right now, you can block certain bumping zones and make him slide and kind of throw himself off. After the update with the collision change, I'm not sure how well you'll be able to do this. But all of the counters to Blight are extremely precise. You have to understand everything really well. You have to have good reaction time, good thinking, good decision making. And the the worst thing about Blight is maybe just the fact that he's quite mechanically skilled, and he's rather precise, more precise than Nurse maybe. So he's definitely number two. Nurse is way higher than him, but he's still incredibly strong, even with all the nerfs he's been getting. Next we have Spirit. So like I said in my first tier list, Spirit and Chucky were an S tier. I made a brand new tier, A plus tier, as you guys can see. And I'm sure you'll immediately notice some other changes I made if you paid attention to the other tier list. We'll get there. So now we have Spirit. Let's talk about her. The reason I moved them from S tier is just because of how much more borderline broken Spirit and Blight are. But I still think Spirit is quite good. Spirit used to have ridiculous add-ons, and she used to basically have no counterplay with her power because you used to not be able to tell when she was phasing. But she's received some balance changes, and over time she's gotten some counterplay. Her add-ons are more in line with other killers. She just isn't as strong. But in me saying that she has counterplay, it's very minimal. Spirit has the ability to, she really throws off survivors. She makes people look worse than they actually are. That is because of her passive phasing. So before I even get into her power, I'll explain her passive phasing. So her passive phasing makes it to where she'll, every now and again, you can't control this, you don't know when it's happening, but from the survivor's FOV, or point of view, whatever, she will, flicker, and it makes survivors literally not know where you are. They won't know the precise point that you're standing on. And they'll just sometimes when you passive phase, they'll make mistakes, and you'll just get free hits. Because just simply on the fact that they didn't know where you were. And now we have her active power, her phase walk. When you use the power, survivors go invisible. They don't know where you are, but you don't know where they are, but they don't know where you are either. And survivors may be able to hear what direction you're coming from with your phasing, but you can hear everything. You can hear their breathing, their walking, their footsteps. You can hear, you could see the dust and the grass moving when they kick. When they run. You can see and hear everything. You can hear them grunt. It's even easier when they're injured, and so just everything about that. So in these situations, survivors are pretty much when you're phasing, survivors are forced to make a decision, and it most of the time leans in your favor. You are more in control than the survivor is. If they're in the open, it's pretty much always going to be a guaranteed hit. If they're around a short tile where maybe they vault a window or a pallet, even if you're on one side and they vault, you can still predict that and use your increased movement speed to go back the other way and hit them maybe as they're vaulting. While they're locked in the animation. Unless they're in a super safe spot, pretty much everything is unsafe. And again, even if they make the right read, they can still get hit because of just how fast Spirit is during her power. In theory, it's a 50-50 read intensive power, but even then it leans more towards Spirit. The biggest drawback is just when you use your power, you do have a fairly long cooldown, and you are a 110 killer. So moving around bigger maps is rough. She can struggle against survivors that split up. Unlike before, she doesn't have any crazy add-ons for movement. Before she had the mother-daughter ring. Now that's a bit, it's nerfed, so it's not nearly as strong. And she does benefit from using M1 perks, unlike Nurse and Blight. But that just means she can apply Sloppy Butcher, save the best for last if you really need to, instead on perks. But if you're a bit unlucky, if a survivor gets really lucky and drops a pallet at the right time, if you're just bad in chase and you chase one survivor for a little too long, because you know, maybe if the survivor you're chasing has a weird build, like they have Iron Will or Lucky Break, or maybe even off the record, if you're tunneling them, it can be kind of difficult for you to track them as well or as easily. So the fact that she's way up here, I'm assuming that you're good at Spirit. This assumes that you know what you're doing, you have a good headset, you can hear survivors well, you can hear them breathing, all those things. But she's a little more mechanically intensive than maybe she used to when she had when her add-ons were super overtuned. But like I said, in most chase scenarios, they are usually in her favor. If you're not as good at Spirit, she could probably drop down a few spots on the list. Okay, now we have Chucky. This is probably, besides Sadako, this is probably the killer I saw most people disagree with my placement. And so I'll explain. And before I explain, let me just tell you that I can see him being here or lower. Just because I place him here doesn't mean I think he is only here and can only get better. I don't have any way to show it to you because I don't have any visual on screen. But all of these killers can be weaker or stronger. So like Chucky, for example, can be better than Spirit, and he can be worse than Huntress in worst case scenario. So he can move up and he can move down. All the killers can. So there's that. The reason I put him here is I kind of, for every killer, their actual placement, I kind of averaged it out and placed them where I think they are more often than not. So for Chucky, in my opinion, Chucky is he has the highest ratio of skill to performance. So like I said before, Spirit was super easy. Nowadays, she's a little bit more mechanically intensive, like Nurse and Blydar. Chucky is not. So simple things out of the way. He has a small character model. He's in third person. He has stealth. So basic mind games are easier to do than other killers. He excels in indoor maps. He's still pretty strong on open maps. And he's consistent in strength throughout all MMR brackets or whatever. There's only really 2 MMRs. There's low MMR and high MMR, and it's not super hard to reach high MMR. But against really strong survivors, Chucky can still persist. This is because of his chase power. His power, it's just, so first of all, it allows you to vault windows faster. It allows you to scamper under pallets, and it has a dash. The dash goes quite a long distance, and it can damage survivors, of course. All of this stuff put together means that survivors are basically not safe in any spot on the map. Unless you have multiple chain pallets, multiple chain windows all put together, or if the Chucky just misses outright, then you're pretty much never safe. It's very forgiving, but here's the thing. When he came out, it was very forgiving. It's easy to control. You can adjust it last second, like when you do the actual jump. So you run for a little bit and then you jump. When you jump, you were able to adjust it quite well. You can do like super heavy flicks. The hitbox used to be extremely forgiving. As of a few weeks ago, though, his power, like, at least in my experience, I'll jump and I'll just go through a survivor. I've tried letting go of the attack on top of the survivor to see if the hitbox will come out immediately. I've tried letting go earlier to see if to see if the hitbox doesn't come out until Chucky actually slices down. Like you jump and then kind of slice down. Maybe that animation is where the hitbox starts. But beyond that, I don't know. I don't know if it's a bug or if there's some sort of logic behind the hitbox that I'm misunderstanding. That wasn't really the case before, but as of recently, he's just felt super weird to use. After I record this video, I'm going to post a match I played as Chucky, and you guys can let me know if you agree with me that it looks kind of weird, or if I'm just stupid, and you guys are alright, and Chucky's just a solid C- tier killer, and his power is not as good as I'm making it sound. Beyond that one issue, though, that's been happening lately, which, mind you, could just be a skill issue on my part, which, again, doesn't really change where a killer is going to be placed. Except, normally, in Chucky's case, the reason I have him so high is partly due because of how easy he is compared to his strength. So in Chucky's case, in particular, maybe I'd move him a little bit lower, just because I have him so high because he's so easy. So if his hitbox being not as forgiving makes him a little bit harder, I would be fine with moving him a little bit down. So his power has a cooldown of like 20 seconds, and it can be less with certain add-ons. You're like every 20 seconds you're gonna get a hit. If the hitbox gets fixed, or if you get good, and the hitbox is the way it's supposed to work, and I'm just bad. But if you get good at it, you're gonna hit a survivor every 20 seconds. Even good survivors get hit by Chucky. On top of that, like on the PTB, there used to be a trick where you could flick basically 180 degrees. They removed this. So with this ability, he was definitely top 3, but they removed this. But he can still, with good camera movement and good, input with certain inputs, you can still hug walls, and you can still get around corners and hit survivors pretty well. You could still, kind of like do a U-turn thing where it's almost a 180, and hit survivors that are trying to dodge you. And again, the fact that Chucky's in third person makes the certain like FOV tech survivors can do against you, those don't work at all. And it's just even with the cooldown, he's still very consistent. And Chucky starting out his first chase can be very short, and you can start ramping up perks. And once he gets going, he's just really difficult to stop. So again, I do see him going lower. And if the hitbox, the way it's been working for me recently, is the way it's intended, maybe I would move him a little bit lower, just because that would make him a little bit harder to use. But I'm not sure. You guys can let me know in the video I post after this. Next we have Artist. Artist. I don't know. Artist is just strong from everywhere. So let's start. She's really powerful up close. So Artist is crows. Most people know that you have to shoot a survivor with the crow and they'll get swarmed. Then you have to shoot them again and they'll take a damage state. But what I guess some people don't know that when the crows are very close to you and they're in your line of sight, you will just take direct damage. There doesn't need to be any sort of swarming first. She doesn't have to go through any of that. She just immediately can damage you. But beyond that, she can, obviously her birds go through the map. They go across the entire map, so she could be very omnipotent. She can constantly pressure survivors. She's a very good user of gen blocking perks that force survivors off, like Deadman Switch. If you use Barbecue and Deadman Switch, you can see survivors. You can shoot a bird, and they either take a damage state because they don't get off the gen, or they do get off the gen and it gets blocked. She's a pretty good user of Merciless Storm. She's and her biggest flaw is her biggest flaws can be mitigated by add-ons. I'd say her biggest flaw is, well, probably verticality, because her crows they can't go vertically. They can only go horizontally. But besides that, which makes her a little bit map dependent, which could drop her a few places, I would be okay with dropping her to A tier rather than A plus where I have her. I just play her a lot. So this one's a little bit biased. Forgive me for that. I could move her, but I'll just keep her here for now. But anyways, other weaknesses that Artist has can be like body blocking. Body blocking can be mitigated by the Severed Hands add-on, where instead of an injured survivor having a healthy survivor take a hit for them, they get swarmed, and then they take a damage state, and you have to hit them several times. The Severed Hands will spread swarming to both survivors, and it makes it a lot less tricky to try and hit survivors that many times. Because if you have an injured survivor and you have a healthy survivor trying to take a hit, theoretically, let's say that person you're chasing is dead on hook, the injured survivor is dead on hook, and then you have a healthy person who hasn't been hooked trying to take a hit. You'd have to hit the survivor with a bird, you'd have to hit him again, you'd have to hit him with a bird, you'd have to hit him again, and then you have to hit the dead on hook survivor, provided you want to keep on tunneling them until they die. So that would be 6 hits, best case scenario. If we're excluding the fact that you can obviously get close-up hits, If they're just holding forward and trying to delay you as much as they can, best case scenario is 6 hits, even more if you miss and they repel the birds. So the Severed Hands completely negates that. She can defend totems very well. She can defend generators. She could do a lot, and other add-ons that may make it easier. So let's say you could also deny windows and pallets. So let's say you put a bird next to a window. The survivor is gonna want to pretend like they're gonna go through it to bait you to shoot your birds, but maybe they don't quite. Maybe they go up, they pretend like they're gonna go through, and they double back. With Matthias's baby shoes add-on, you can see their auras when they're around the idle birds. This completely negates that mind game. This just allows you to know exactly what to do. They're never gonna be able to screw with you. That you're never gonna fall for anything. The mind game is just completely negated, so you're always gonna hit them in that. So you can completely deny the usage of windows or pallets, especially with that add-on. She has she has other add-ons that reduce her cooldowns, such as so when you shoot off your birds, you have a cooldown for you have a longer cooldown the more birds you shoot. So let's say you shoot one bird, you have a shorter cooldown if you shoot 3. So generally you want to shoot one bird off to swarm a survivor, and then you want to shoot them again to damage them. When when you go for the damage, you generally want to shoot all 3 just to make sure you can actually get the hit. But it can sometimes, with their movement, it can sometimes be a little bit weird to place all 3 in a spot that you know you're going to damage them. So with the add-on that decreases the cooldown of the birds, that makes it a little bit better. The Sever Tongue add-on, which is my favorite add-on for Artist, it reduces the time that you're slowed after shooting off birds. That can get you a lot of hits that you otherwise wouldn't. She has a yellow add-on that makes survivors hindered when you swarm them. That add-on can be used really well in chase. Her iridescent add-on, the Garden of Rot, can be used to insta-down survivors. That's a very underrated add-on. It's quite good. Even though it's only 4 seconds, you can get right on top of them, and they may not know it's there, especially if it doesn't get called out later down the line. From people who've already been hit by it, you can just get free insta-downs. So, Artist overall has strong add-ons. She has the power to shut down loops. She can constantly pressure survivors. She can apply perks she can apply a lot of perks very well. And all of her weaknesses, most of her weaknesses can be negated with add-ons. The only weakness that she can't negate is the verticality aspect. So certain maps like RPD maybe and other maps that have verticality to them with a lot of important gens and stuff, those are a little bit hard to defend. But even then, you can still do everything. She's strong up close, she's strong from afar, and she can use a lot of builds fairly well. Like, she's not locked behind one specific build. Sorry that was a bit messy. I didn't really write a script for Artists because I didn't write a script for all of them. I wrote a script for most of them, which is why I can explain some killers better than others. Because there are a lot of killers I have a lot more to say than others. So, with that being said, next up is Plague. So, Plague at her worst, she's just a normal M1 killer who infects survivors. So, at most, she's just a 115 killer, regular terror radius. She moves slowly around the map. She just infects survivors. The only benefit is that she can just instant out survivors because she keeps them infected. There's nothing remarkable. But, so why do I have her so high up? Well, as of the current patch, she has her base kit Red Fountain that lets her use her Red Puke. That can be enhanced by several add-ons. Short loops against this are a complete death sentence, and she can down survivors extremely quickly. Like, she can recover and down survivors. She could just shred through survivor health states. Certain maps have literally nothing for like dealing with this. She's really good at trading on the hook. So normally when the hooked survivor actually doesn't block your Red Puke. It goes through them. So at any angle from an unhook, you can damage the survivor who's trying to unhook them. So if they go all the way around and unhook on the other side, you could just puke from where you're standing and hit all of them. So she can do all of that because of her weaknesses, and her power is really strong. But so are other killers that are a bit lower down. Why do I have Plague way up here? Like for example, Pyramid Head has a really strong power, but he's 5 tiers below Plague. Why is that? Her add-ons are incredible. They're insane. First, if you have the Iridescent Seal, plus the Amulet. So the Iridescent Seal makes it to where every time a gen's complete, you get your red puke for free, but it reduces the red puke duration from a minute to 40 seconds. If you have the Amulet, which increases the time to by 20 seconds, that just negates the downside. So you're basically just using one really strong add-on with no downside. And if you bring like a little bit of passive slowdown, like Deadlock and Grim Embrace and Deadman Switch, you have 5 free uses of red puke. And if you were good at Plague with a build like this, you just win. You just win. Her power can be used in so many ways that reward Plagues for really learning her tricks. There's a trick you can do that allows Plague to kind of shoot up, and it'll come down in a way. It's like rain. It'll just rain down on the survivor. So when they're on super tall loops, with tall walls and whatever, normally when you wouldn't be able to hit them, because it's super long walls and they can see you coming and they can get around the corners, whatever, you can aim up and it'll actually hit them on the way down, and they can't avoid it. So you get rewarded for being able to use her red puke really well. And honestly, beyond the red puke, her green puke allows her to ignore so everyone knows the whole the weaker link thing. It's better to chase weaker survivors. If there's a super strong survivor, you don't want to really bother them. Plague's green puke can let you just infect them and then ignore them. They can't heal with their medkits because she negates healing perks or whatever. They're either constantly going to be injured or they're going to go cleanse and they're going to feed you your red puke. So it's a win-win for you either way. She has, and other than her Iridescent add-on, the Seal, she's another Eerie add-on which reveals survivors when they puke. She has her Apple add-ons, which are my personal favorite, which give her more red pools by default. She even has a meme add-on. Her meme add-on, which are the add-ons that generally want to nerf your power, but then give you extra blood points. Even her meme add-on it basically just changes her playstyle, and is actually not even that bad. It makes it to where you patrol gens. Like, you just go around and patrol gens and puke on them and make you a bit more efficient at doing that, rather than being able to directly puke on them to infect them. But that honestly in itself is a strong playstyle you could play with. So Plague ignores healing. She has really powerful add-ons, but without all these add-ons, she would definitely be lower. And she's also a bit RNG reliant with the fountain spawns, because sometimes they can just spawn where you're never gonna go. So she definitely would be lower, but with her insane add-ons, she's up here. Wesker is up next. Wesker was one of the killers I in my second video that I talked about a little bit more than I did in my original video. So I'll basically just go over the same things I did in that video. So Wesker has a very versatile kit that has a lot of things that make him better. So let's just list them. So first of all, it's a mobility power that it doesn't cover a crazy amount of ground, but it can definitely negate survivors who are holding W, which is generally the strongest strat you can do against half the killers in the game. You can, when you grab them, not only can you damage survivors, but you also infect them, which will later down the line, when they get fully infected, they'll be 8% hindered, and they'll be insta-downable. Not only with the insta-down, that's already great, but being hindered by 8% against any killer is pretty much just a death sentence, unless you're, especially against Wesker, of course, unless you're in a super safe part of the map. So he has that going for him. The fact that being fully infected is super bad means that you can, when you spray yourself, no matter where Wesker is on the map, he'll get Killer Instinct, and you'll see the survivor no matter what. So if you don't know where anyone is, or if you really want to tunnel a survivor who's dead on hook and who happens to be infected, they can spray themselves and you can go immediately for them. So he gets guaranteed info. You can vault pallets and windows and even break them with a certain break pallets with the iridescent add-on. You can And hell, even if, when you grab survivors with your power, you can, when you run out of, or sorry, when you run out of bound range, which is the distance that you'll carry them before slamming them into a wall, you'll throw them. If you can throw them into a wall, they'll take a damage state. But if you're in the corner of the map or something like that, they'll be forced to run back into you, and you can just immediately hit them because you barely have a cooldown when you throw them. So he has a lot going for him. He's very versatile. And again, even though his power doesn't cover a lot of range, it still covers enough ground to be worthwhile just to use for distance. But again, it's mostly just for the fact that you can cancel the survivor's abilities to hold forward. If they're just running in a straight line, you can catch them completely by surprise and they will not even expect it. That's the most of it. Honestly, he just has so much going for him. I think one of the biggest things besides is just the fact that he's a good tunneler. The fact that you infect survivors and the fact that when they get fully infected, they have such a bad downside, they have to spray themselves. So Wesker having a strong power and having his mobility, no matter where on the map you get the info, that you can capitalize on it super well as a Wesker. His biggest weaknesses are probably just circular loops where he can't really use his power that well. And that's it. As far as I'm aware, he doesn't have any, I can't really point out any super glaring issues that make him really, really weak. The only thing that's keeping him here is the fact that his add-ons kind of suck. His add-ons, in my opinion, are really well designed. I do like them. He doesn't have any super lethal add-ons that would bring him super high up, kind of like Plague. Next is Billy. Billy... So... Ooh, wow. Where did I put him? So next up is Billy. Billy is another killer that I don't really have a lot to talk about, so forgive me. But put simply, Billy is just... He's really strong now that he has overdrive instead of overheat. He got several subtle changes from the PTB where he got buffed in. He has a much nicer speed for map traversal. He has a better cooldown. The better cooldown is really nice. There are a lot of situations where you can barely miss a survivor and be right next to them, and because of the shorter cooldown, you can hit them before they make it to a pallet or a window where you otherwise wouldn't be able to before the rework. You have so much ability to just bounce around the map and pressure one survivor and to be able to pressure another survivor and another survivor. You can be all around the map and you get rewarded for doing this, unlike before where you'd get punished for constantly using your chainsaw, whereas now you get rewarded. You get stronger during overdrive. You are the fastest killer in the game at 13.1, I think, meters per second during overdrive. And you can obviously still curve really well, even stronger than before because of how fast you are. Sometimes survivors can't even react because of how fast you move. He's a monster when it comes to pressuring many people at once. The only thing is that he's a way harder to play than a lot of other killers, so maybe he's a little bit lower than I'm putting him, but I think he's here. Next up is Oni. Oni is... He's a killer that... Let's see. So, when he starts at the trial, he's a basic-ass killer. He doesn't do anything. He's a 115 movement speed killer, 32-meter terror radius, all of the sort. He's basic. He doesn't do anything. But then you injure a couple of survivors, collect your blood, and then, in my opinion, now you have the strongest power, top 3 powers, maybe even the strongest power in the game. During this power, your Blood Fury, you can move around the map really fast, you can break pallets, you can break walls, and you can insta-down survivors. And by default, it's 45 seconds, and it can go up to 63, I think, with both duration add-ons. Because the Fang is 10 seconds, and the flag is... Or not the flag, the banner, the standard whatever, is 8. So, those are probably his best add-ons. When you down a survivor, you do lose a chunk of your power, but again, with the duration add-ons, you can still get plenty of downs. The biggest issue with Oni is just you can't really. Sometimes on many big maps, it's kind of hard to get the ball rolling, because you do need that first hit. It can be difficult to get the first hit, and there's a chance when you get to your first down. Like if you pick up that survivor, you lose your power, obviously. And if you down the survivor and you don't do anything, you don't pick them up. Maybe if the survivors are split up, you risk not getting any benefit from the rest of your power. Like sometimes you just you won't get any value from the rest of your power. You won't hit any more survivors. You won't find anyone. And then the survivor that you did down will pick themselves up or get picked up by a teammate or whatever. So it's kind of risky decision making that you have to do, Zoni, during your power, and just yeah. You may notice that he's like way further down. He was behind Plague, now he's not. So I'm putting him here because of Ultimate Weapon's nerf. So in the current patch of DBD right now, like right before the next patch is coming out, Ultimate Weapon, when you open a locker, it'll activate, and as you move around the map, survivors will scream. That was the one glaring issue I talked about, where if you don't pick up the survivor from your power, but then you don't find anyone else, well, you're fucked. You really don't get anything. But if you do find the survivor, then you're fine. So with Ultimate Weapon, that was really easy to do. But now that Ultimate Weapon's getting hard nerfed, where before it would used to carry with you, now it's only going to stay 32 meters around the locker. It's not as good. It may not sound terrible, but either you move as a regular killer around the map in order to open a locker that a lot of survivors are around, which you don't have the time to do that. You need to go picking up blood to get into your power, or you're in your power, but you're wasting your precious seconds doing the exact same thing that you would normally want to spend trying to down survivors. And again, the fact that it only stays in the locker, you're not guaranteed to find everyone. You may only find one survivor at first, and by the time other survivors would come in, you just wouldn't have your power. So it wastes too much time. Lethal Pursuer is still really good on him. You could use it to find several survivors, but if you only find one or two without it, or even with it, like it could be hard to commit to one survivor. And if you try to leave that survivor, again, you have no power, so they can either call you out leaving, or the survivors that you're going towards will have plenty of time to react anyways, because they can either hide or go to a loop or whatever. So getting that first hit can be difficult. And now that Ultimate Weapon won't be so potent, you're just not going to be as strong. So while he is still very strong, he's still really high in A tier. I think that Ultimate Weapon alone is what allowed him to be so high up, and now he's a little bit lower. Next we have Pyramid Head. Pyramid Head is first of all, I want to point out that he has a super awful bug that makes him probably my least favorite killer to play right now. Where his camera is super wobbly when you're in your power. Like it'll pull your camera like as you're moving your sword. It feels so bad. But what does he have going for him? His power can pretty much get hits anywhere because it goes through walls. So he can punish survivors making mistakes really well. He can be extremely oppressive. If you know exactly where survivors are going to stand, you can pretty much always get a hit. So it can be super oppressive. Even good survivors struggle because like just resources don't really do that well against Pyramid Head pallets and windows. But well, on top of all of that, he can torment survivors, and cages are extremely good for Pyramid Head because they allow you to tunnel and everything. I don't think this is healthy for the game, and same with Nurse. A lot of killers here, I have plans to suggest changes for them that I'm going to start posting here in the future. I don't know what I'm going to call it. I don't know if I'm going to make it a series, but I'm going to start posting videos where I kind of just discuss ideas that I have for a lot of things. Again, so far with these tier list videos, you guys probably think I'm an idiot. So maybe you're not going to even take anything I have to say. You're going to take everything I say with a grain of salt, but that's fine. But anyways, a little bit off track. Back to Pyramid Head. The fact that his power is very strong and you can pretty much always hit survivors anywhere, and his cages are really strong. His biggest, why is he, in A tier, but still way lower than Nurse or whatever? I don't, put simply, his biggest strength is his ability to use passive slowdown and be very oppressive in chase. But he has no map traversal, so large maps hurt him a lot, and his add-ons are terrible. His add-ons are horrendous. He is like his range. He has 2 good add-ons, the ranged add-ons. There are 3 ranged add-ons. One of them just isn't that good though, and then he has another add-on that leaves trails for longer, and that one's pretty okay. But that's it. Those are his 3 best add-ons. So not a very good killer. Well, excuse me. The add-ons, his lack of good add-ons keep him from going any higher. And again, the fact that he has 0 map traversal. It's kind of like Plague, but Plague has super good add-ons. Pyramid Head doesn't. Now we have Huntress. Huntress is a killer with a super high skill ceiling. But like, one thing to note right off the bat is she has a bunch of really strong. She has a good variety of strong add-ons, which a lot of killers don't. A lot of killers have good add-ons, but not that many. Plague and Blight probably have, the biggest variety of strong add-ons, except besides Huntress. But other killers have maybe like 3 at most really good add-ons. So there's a bit of variety. The Huntress has a small terror radius, so you can't really use any perks that would benefit from a big terror radius. And she's a constant lullaby, so you can't really stealth in any way, despite the small terror radius. Even though there's a bit there, like the horse add-on, for example, you can make her quite unpredictable. But for the most part, to simplify this killer down, what it comes down to, she can hit survivors from afar, so Huntress can punish. Unhooking, it's a lot like Huntress, but she doesn't have to hit several times. So she can punish unhooking, arguably better than Artist can. She can punish totems. She can interrupt gens, perhaps. She can interrupt. Like you could just honestly, you could just take damage if the killer gets lucky. And up close, she's even more deadly. If a loop doesn't have like super tall walls, you're very likely to get hit. So the gameplay loop against Huntress is just trying to find a place with tall walls that she really can't easily hit damage you on. But if the Huntress knows what they're doing, most places on most maps, well, on a lot of maps, have super tiny gaps and openings that allow the Huntress to get hits pretty easily. So I don't. She also, like, more recently she received 7 hatchets up from 5. Which allows her to use other add-ons besides her belt add-ons. Her belt add-ons don't give her more hatchets anymore. They give her movement speed after you land a hatchet shot. But even if those still gave you hatchets, there are even more add-ons you can use now, like the oak whatevers that give you cooldown time or less cooldown time. So like if you run the cooldown add-ons, for example, Huntress has like just a disgusting ability to just shred through health states. You cannot save against her. She can punish survivors super easily in the open. She can punish survivors unhooking. She can punish survivors. She could super easily punish survivor mistakes. It's just that Huntress has a super high dependency on a good map. So she could go quite lower depending on how you see it. Next is Unknown. Unknown I probably have the least to say about, because again, he's new, he's kind of fresh. Like he's not brand new, but he's still the newest killer. He's good. He's a lot like Huntress, where he has a lot of places where you can shoot your power through to catch survivors off guard where they would not expect it, and you can hit them pretty well. He's not quite as omnipotent as Huntress. Like he can't always punish you from any place on the map, but he has his teleporting power, which does allow him to be pretty much anywhere on the map, because you can place your little hallucinations and it's just an immediate teleport to any of your hallucinations, so you can go from one place on the map to the opposite side in just a second. So with his power being similar to Huntress and Plague, where you can use it in such ways that survivors wouldn't expect, you can pretty much be anywhere on the map with your hallucinations and teleporting to them. And the fact that you have to hit survivors multiple times doesn't always matter that much for this killer, because it doesn't go away. Like, unless they look at you, it doesn't go away. So obviously looking at him, that's not the worst thing in the world. It's not super difficult to get rid of, but if the unknown's nowhere around, you can't get rid of the weakness. So if you have weakness while doing a gen, you have the risk of him just mortaring a shot at you and hitting you. Like, if you don't hear him coming, he could just look up and mortar a shot and you get hit. So he uses perks like Discordance and Tinkerer super well. His add-ons are quite okay. His best add-on is probably the brown add-on that makes the movement speed when you're out of teleporting comes, the full movement speed when you're out of teleporting comes 50% faster. But yeah, other than that, he's a very high skill ceiling killer. He's very hard, but once you know a lot of places where you can shoot from, it can definitely be really difficult for survivors. And especially if, like, you can hit through walls too, if they're hugging walls. So that's all I have to really say about him. His power is just, it's good. He does two different things. He has a ranged power and a teleport power, and both are strong. Now we have Alien. So Alien is kind of like, he's kind of weird. So a lot of people may not think he's that good, but there's two things to note. Are you constantly inside of your crawler, mode power where you're crawling and you can use your tail attack? And are you landing your tail attacks? Well, if you're not, that's probably why he's a bad killer, because he's not really remarkable at doing anything. You're just a basic killer with no utility, no nothing, and the survivors don't waste a lot of time getting the flame turrets, so it's very worthwhile for them to place a turret down and keep you out of your power. So how do you stay inside of your power? Well, you have to understand the flame turrets. When you're around, the turrets show your position. Like, the survivors will know that you're coming. So if you're just playing super passively, if you're just walking around and you're trying to sneak up to survivors, that's not going to work. They're going to know. So you have to use your tunnels well. It's also an important thing to note that when you come out of tunnels, the flame turrets that are around Xeno, that are around Alien, they will disable for some time. So you need to understand how that you need to play it super aggressively. You need to understand just constantly push offense, and it's a good idea as an Alien to use the Lambert star map, because what it does, it's probably his best add-on. What it does is it reduces the range that turrets can see you, that they'll shoot you, by 2 meters. So this makes it a lot easier for Xeno to get up to it and hit it with a basic M1 attack rather than your power. The reason it's not good to hit it with your power is you suffer a super long cooldown. A super long cooldown when you hit it with your tail. And same thing when you hit anything with your tail, you have a super long cooldown. That's why it's super important to make sure you're actually landing your tail attacks. The hitbox is kind of weird, but it's kind of diagonal. It'll like aim downwards. So you can actually hit survivors in a lot of situations that you wouldn't be able to in a lot of other killers. So if you can manage your gameplay to where you're constantly inside of your power, and if you can constantly land your tail attacks, now he's a good killer. And now he is probably one of the most lethal and efficient killers out there. He is so good at damaging survivors, just tearing through health states. And like his main weakness is just resource heavy maps. Chases can sometimes last a while. And if they pre-drop and play really well, they can negate your ability to use your power. So it's a bit of skill from both sides. But if survivors don't do this, this killer is very lethal. And his add-ons aren't anything tremendous. So his best two add-ons, in my opinion, are probably just like the one helmet. I don't know what it's called, but it lets you inflict mangled on your tail attacks. I like using that one, and then the Lambert star map. Now we have Singularity. Singularity I put smack in the middle, which now that I'm looking at it, my tier list looks almost completely even. That's kind of funny. But I put Singularity right in the middle, or well, nearly right in the middle, because he has the potential to be one of the strongest killers in the game, but he's also probably the hardest killer in the game. He's a very complex skill set. Like it takes a lot to understand. So let's talk about it. What he does is he places biopods, which are like cameras around the map that let you see survivors. If there's a survivor inside your range, and they're not hiding behind any cover or whatever, you can slipstream them. Like, you can infect them, and when they're slipstreamed, you can either shoot them again with the biopod, or you could just shoot them with your regular gun, the gun that shoots the biopods in the first place, and go up to them. When you shoot a slipstream survivor, there's a bit of logic behind it where it'll take the location the survivor was a second ago, and that's where you appear. When you appear, you become overclocked. When you're overclocked, you're basically like a super killer. You do all actions faster. You vault, break gens, break walls, break pallets. You do all of that faster. But the thing is, you don't gain any movement speed. And because of the way you appear behind survivors, and while you're appearing, you are slower, survivors have a pretty fair chunk of time to make it to windows. They can still vault pallets. They can pre-drop pallets. Again, you do kick them faster, but pre-dropping and the fact that you have to break it, you still have to kind of catch up. So you have to understand, as this killer, precisely when it's a good time to teleport to them. And this is where, like, and you have to also be good at placing around your cameras. It's more efficient to be good at placing cameras, at the start of the game, than to just place like 2 or 3 cameras per chase in every single tile until you finally get them with a slipstream. And you also have to understand when it's right to destroy a camera, replace a camera. You have to know which cameras are EMP'd by survivors, and all of these things that come together. This is where it gets really tricky to play the Singularity, and why he probably is, turns off a lot of killers. So it's beyond that. Singularity has some pretty good add-ons. His best add-on is probably the Soma family photo, because it's basically just a direct buff. Like I said, during overclock, you have no speed boost, which is like probably the worst thing about overclock. It's kind of a major problem. Well, it's not a major problem. Like, it doesn't need to be addressed. It doesn't need to be fixed. But that's the thing that would make it, not as strong as it normally would be. So with the family photo, you have 5% haste, and this gets you a lot more hits than you would think. So imagine you have a slipstream survivor, and you're using rapid brutality, which is a perk from Alien. When you hit a survivor with a basic attack, you're 5% faster. So now the survivor runs away, and you can catch up with your slipstream, because you can just shoot them and you immediately catch up. Now you have the family photo 5% faster, plus rapid brutality 10% faster, and you have the 15% on top of that, because Singularity is a 115 movement speed killer. Now you're 125% faster than the survivor, and now you're talking. Now you can get a lot of hits that you wouldn't normally, and you're still in overclock, so you can still ignore pallet stuns. So like when a survivor, I didn't even mention this, when a survivor drops a pallet on your head as a Singularity during overclock, you don't get stunned. You ignore it outright. The pallet just breaks. You do get hindered, but the fact that it breaks is so good for you. So the reason I put him here is his strength comes entirely from your own skill. If you know good spots for cameras, if you know whatever, he's really strong. One of the strongest killers. Maybe not A+ tier, but like higher than Billy probably. Maybe around where Wesker is. And if you don't know anything, well, he's pretty low. He can be laughably easy to face. So next we have Hag. Hag is, so as I stated before at the start of this video, when a killer starts the game, you start the game losing. You don't really have anything going for you. That's the thing with Hag, though. You kind of want that. So survivors are generally going to want to spend as much time as possible away from the killer, so that way they don't spend time chasing. They negate the killer's early game to apply like strong regression perks or whatever. So this actually benefits you as Hag, because at the start of a game as Hag, you're going to want to set up a web, and this web will let you win most of your games, because your traps are very strong, you can teleport to your traps, and you're very lethal. So the survivors are going to want to actually be super aggressive and try to stop you, try to disrupt you, try to whatever. So in the situation where a team is efficient at doing these things, they disrupt you in placing your traps. They constantly activate your traps when you're not really in a convenient spot to teleport. They constantly disarm your traps by, you know, getting rid of it in the ground. They play everything right. Hag can be a very hard killer to try and catch up with. She just can't keep up. But in the situation where the survivors are just across the map doing their generators, they don't come to you, which on average I've found that most teams don't. Most teams are not smart enough to do that. So in this situation where they don't rush you down and they let you place your web, you win. She can be like Singularity, where you feel so tremendously powerful. You are so powerful as a hag. If they let you place your shit down, then you win. It's so great how all the survivors can be playing super safely, super passively. All it takes is one careless survivor to fuck up, and you can hook them around your web, and that's it. That's it. Once you do that, the rest of the survivors are gonna have to risk their own, their lives to go save her, and that's when Hag starts to truly shine, because they're gonna have to if they don't hurry up, the survivors is just gonna die on hook. But so they're gonna have to step into your traps. You're gonna be able to teleport to them. You're gonna hit them. You're gonna be super lethal. You're gonna feel like you're fully in control. So most of Hag just boils down to if they are super aggressive in the start or not. If they let you get your web down, more often than not, you can make a super great comeback. If they're really aggressive, it can be very hard for her to keep up. Next is Pinhead. Man, so as with most killers, he can really shine against weaker teams just because of how hard his box can be for them to manage. So the main point of Pinhead is to constantly keep his chain hunt going, in which case he can feel pretty oppressive, and he really never lets up. Sadly, once survivors are smarter and once they get better, they'll handle the box much better. Chain hunts will be harder to activate, and in which case your main power, your chain, your possessed chain, that in itself can be kind of difficult to use sometimes, and it could kind of backfire on you if you don't use it right. The power itself, it'll send out like a portal, and you can actually use it to check certain locations. It'll go vertically, so you can check up, you can check down, you could check rooms that you wouldn't have to waste your time going through. You could check a lot of places, so this does save a lot of time. But the power itself is an anti-loot power. What it does is when you hit a survivor with it, they'll be super slowed down, and they'll have to get rid of your chains. But it has a bit of weird logic to it. If you walk through the chain as a Pinhead, they'll go away, you'll get rid of them. If the survivor walks through a wall, they'll also get rid of. So it can feel kind of weird. But if you understand how to play around the logic of the chains, and if you play your power right, you know how to use it well, you land your shots, he can be a really strong anti-loop killer. And it makes him stronger than the average killer alone, but his main strength comes down to the pressure of the box. His add-ons are quite good. His add-ons aren't as strong as they used to be, not at all. He used to have two really strong add-ons, the the Engineer's Fang, which would basically just let you injure survivors with no downside. They nerfed it, now it has a downside that makes it not really worth the run unless you really know what you're doing. And then the Original Pain. The Original Pain made it to where you could chain a survivor, and then when they got rid of it, they would go into Deep Wound, and then their endurance that they get from getting unhooked would just go away, and you would be able to tunnel them. Now those are both changed, and his add-ons aren't nearly as strong. The best thing you can do is understand the logic of the box as well, so it has a bit of logic behind it, where it'll spawn away from you. Like, let's say as a Pinhead, you're here. A big circle around the Pinhead, kind of, like this, the game will take that into account. And then there can be a survivor here, a survivor here, a survivor here, and maybe a survivor way over here. And there's a tiny circle around 1, 2, 3, and 4. So there's a circle around you, a big circle around you, and then there's a circle around all the survivors. So because, all the survivors are here and you're here, the box will spawn here. So as a Pinhead, using Lethal Pursuer can really help you, because you can understand where you are, where all the survivors are, and if you understand the logic of the box, you can go pick it up and start your chain hunts. All right, now we have Skull Merchant. Skull Merchant is a lot like Wesker, just I guess weaker. When I say that is, her power isn't similar, but it's similar in the fact that there's just a lot of things, a lot of small things that make her stronger. So let's just go over them. First of all, when you place your drones, she can be stealthy, so you can sneak up on gens and survivors. You can detect the precise location of where survivors are with your drones. You could place them in chase, and they do all sorts of things. When a survivor gets tagged by the little drone, they get the little thing, the little chip. You move faster. They can become hindered. They will take damage. If they're already injured, they'll get deep wounded, which in itself wastes time. But they can also deep wound in itself can make getting chased a little bit harder because it'll darken your screen. So especially if someone's using like a not super strong monitor, well, not a bright monitor, they have like bad resolution, it can be very hard to get chased. So all of those things make her quite good. There's also the fact that people just don't want to face her. People do not want to face her at all. In most of my games that I play Survivor, I actually lose against Skull Merchant, so it may seem weird that I'm putting her down here. Again, I tried to look at these all objectively. Most of them anyways. Like I said, Artist is a little bit subjective, but I put her down here because, again, even though she has probably the highest kill rate or one of the highest kill rates in the game, she, in theory, if people took the time to try and face her, she probably wouldn't be that strong, because none of her add-ons are super tremendous. Like, all of her add-ons are just super simple. None of them are super lethal, so she has good add-ons. She has good add-ons. They're just, none of them are super incredible. So people could just take the time to learn how to face her, but like as of now, the best way, the things I see people do just to counter her, you can stop moving, and that'll delay the drone activating on you a little bit, and you can also crouch. And there's things you can do to maybe delay her, and also there's the fact that when she's placing a drone, you can obviously run away, but that's also a benefit for her. Like, survivors have to run away. They can't play around your power. They're going to be forced to run away, because if they stay around a loop, with the fact that they get deep wounded, with the fact that they get hindered, with the fact that they will take damage eventually, with the fact, well, they'll get deep wounded after they get injured, so they'll get injured first, then deep wounded, and the fact that you're faster on top of them being slower, you'll eventually just overpower them. You'll just overtake them. They'll eventually go down, so they're going to have to leave. So eventually you will just catch up to them, which is why not many people like her, and because of the fact of what she was when she first came out, being, you know, the queen of 3-genning. So, yeah, I don't know. Her again, I feel like if people would take the time to get better at being chased by her, she'd probably be a little bit worse, which is why I put her here. She's still quite good, just not, you know, not crazy good, despite her kill rate and stuff. Now we have Doctor. Doctor hasn't moved a whole lot, as you guys can see from my initial tier list. A lot of these killers, most of the B+ tier killers haven't, but yeah, I didn't move Doctor that much. Doctor before was probably like, he was probably like top of B-, but with his buffs, he's probably B+. So Doctor's strengths are fairly unique. First of all, again, he excels at facing bad teams because he has a super complex kit. But again, most killers excel at facing bad teams. So like, at higher levels, you need to be more precise with your power. Like, you can't just spam it. Big maps are really bad for Doctor because you have no map traversal. Doctor can use gimmick builds with his add-ons, like a bigger terror radius or smaller terror radius. You can do stealth builds, whatever, and sometimes your gimmick just won't work against certain teams. So those all can just be negated, which can hurt. But if you can live through all of these, Doctor can be very good. Doctor can, first of all, he can negate item usage by putting survivors into tier 3. You can also gain passive info from survivors being in Madness 2 and 3 with the hallucination doctors that will appear around them. So you get basic info. He has a lot of like action negating built in to him, like when you're in Madness tier 3, I should explain. You have to do a little an action you have to do a channeled action where you have to like snap out of it, and that doesn't take a lot of time, but that takes a little bit of time. So he gets passive info and a little bit of passive slowdown. The biggest thing though is the shock itself. The shock allows you to pacify survivors, meaning they can't do pretty much any action. They can't vault windows, they can't vault pallets, they can't drop pallets, they can't unhook, they can't use active perks like Dead Hard or For the People, they can't heal, obviously. They basically just can't do anything. So even someplace like a shack, where it has, you know, a strong window and a strong pallet, even shack can be completely negated with Doctor and a lot of other loops. This is where Doctor's biggest strength comes in. Doctor has... This is where I say he's fairly unique in his strengths. Doctor has consistent chases. So, what I mean by this, most of the time, a killer's first chase is their weakest. Survivors have all the resources, they have everything on the map. Doctor, because of the fact that he can negate survivors to vault and drop pallets and stuff like this, his first chase can be as fast or as, you know, slow as his last. He's very consistent at all points in the game. And because you can get your first, it's not like a Wraith where, again, like your first chase will be as long as possible. So because your first chase can be as fast as your last, he's very well at applying early game perk pressure, and he's super good at applying. The reason I have him quite high is because he's very good at applying the perk Merciless Storm. So Merciless Storm makes it to where when a gen gets to 90% progress, survivors will have to hit a chain of skill checks. They'll hit one skill check, another one, another one, another one, another one, another one. With Doctor, when the survivor is in madness, every skill check, the skill checks will be smaller, with certain perks, but like they'll be sporadic. So sometimes with Doctor, skill checks have the chance of being off center. They can be here, here, or whatever, and they also have a chance of being backwards. So what will happen is you'll hit a skill check, it'll bounce to another part of the screen. You'll hit a skill check, it'll bounce to another part of the screen. It'll bounce to another part of the screen, etc. And this can be very difficult for any survivor of any skill to hit. So, unless you're Scott Jun, that guy is just crazy. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the clip of him hitting the skill check with no problems. So, I've tried it myself. I couldn't do it personally. But yeah, the fact that he can use Merciless Storm so well means that every gen takes like an extra 20 seconds to complete. And ever since his buff, you're less reliant on Discipline add-ons because of the base kit Discipline, pretty much. So now you have more room to use his best add-on, the Iridescent Queen, which is, you know, like I said, it's probably his best add-on, and it punishes altruism. So, like, before the meta had... Before, obviously, he was weaker, but also, the meta was made for this, for Survivor, which kind of hurt him, because the Survivor was faster, and because the Doctor slows himself down when he uses his shock, the Survivor would make a lot of distance. But it's not popular, it got changed, it's not as popular anymore, it got changed. Doctor has, you know, his buffs now, and he has more room for better add-ons. So, his biggest drawbacks are the same as every other average killer, which are just big maps, survivors that split up, all of those things, but he's very good at applying Merciless Storm and other gen blocking perks. He's very consistent at chasing, and like I said, he has some fairly strong add-ons. So I would say it's quite fair for me to place him here instead of where he was before his buff, even though in theory it was just a minor buff. Okay, next we have Twins. Twins was one of the killers I think I actually did decently explaining in my very first video, but I'll explain her again. Obviously. So Twins, in my opinion, has the most variety in where she can be placed. She is very strong. She is very, very strong. In a lot of tournaments, excuse me, in a lot of tournaments, she can actually be one of the strongest killers, because in tournaments, survivors are limited to what they can use. So why is Twins way down here? Well, her biggest counters are very popular perks. So Unbreakable, certain healing perks, Dead Hard, just all of these perks, like they're good counters to Twins, and she can struggle a lot against them. So because they're strong perks that are very popular that counter Twins, she's really, really not as good as she would be. But the reason she's so strong is because of Victor. Victor is a 150% movement speed, you know, killer, and his power is just like, it's pretty much unavoidable. if the victor knows what they're doing, and the survivor whatever, the survivor is pretty much never going to avoid a victor. It is pretty much guaranteed that you will hit them as victor, which makes it very challenging to try and avoid him. So like I said, the reason she's way down here is, in theory, she's really strong, really strong. Like I said, in tournament standards, where some perks are limited and survivors can't really do as much as they would be in pubs, Twins is very strong. But because survivors aren't limited in pubs, she's way down here. But her power itself is one of the strongest powers, just because Victor is such a little menace. He's very fast and has survivors have a very difficult time dodging him. So, and in the next update, she was gonna be borderline best killer in the game, bar none. I'm sorry, she was gonna be so broken. So, I'm sorry to any Twins mains, but at least now you have those base kit add-on changes that make her feel a little bit better. Because in my opinion, her biggest flaw was just the fact that she felt bad. She was never weak. Even when she first got her rework, she was never weak. She was always strong. She just had issues with perks, which indirectly made her less strong. So, but now she has some of those add-ons that are base kit, which should make her better. We'll have to see. I do think she still needs a rework, but not what she got. She needs just some fixes to certain things. Now we have Deathslinger. Deathslinger is... It's a bit strange. So depending on who you ask, Deathslinger might actually switch spots with Huntress. Deathslinger has the potential to be very strong. Deathslinger has a lot going for him. He's a ranged killer like Huntress, so he can punish survivors from being far away. Not quite far, not as far. He's not super omnipotent around the map, but in the chase aspect, he is. In the chase aspect, he can punish survivors from being super far, he can reel them in, and the fact that he hits you normally with your basic attack, he can use M1 perks. He can apply M1 perks. Despite being a ranged killer, he can use Save the Best for Last, Sloppy Butcher, and other instant-on perks, which are very good for him. But his benefits, despite the fact that he's a good ranged killer, despite the fact that he can apply M1 perks, those are basically his biggest benefits. The fact that he's a ranged killer is so strong in itself. Like, there's only two major benefits, but those two benefits in themselves are very strong. But his biggest issue is he's a 110 movement speed killer, and he's very slow at punishing survivors. So Huntress has to reload, but she has 7 hatchets. 7 hatchets. Deathslinger has 1 bullet before he has to reload. So he's very sluggish. Because he's a 110 killer and because he only has 1 bullet, it's quite hard to punish many survivors at once. Like, if survivors are grouped up and they make mistakes and whatever, he can't chew through their health bars, through their health states, as well as like a Huntress could or something. So while he does have really good benefits, he's a little bit limited in the fact that he's not super efficient, he's not super lethal, he's just kind of slow. Honestly, this is probably the one killer. A lot of these killers I want to go a little bit more in detail with for fixes, I would suggest. But for Deathslinger's case, there's one major thing that I've wanted him to have for a while, and that's for either to, two things actually. I want him to reload when you hook a survivor. So after you hook a survivor, you reload automatically, and 2 bullets. Okay, two spears. Like, cooldown in between either of them. Maybe like a slight... you go through the animation cooldown, and maybe there would be like a 6-second interval where you can't use your power, but 2 bullets before you have to reload. That would be what I would do. Just simply to fix him. His add-ons are fine. Everything else is fine. Those would be the 2 things off the top of my head that I can think of that I think would really benefit him and wouldn't be too overbearing for the survivors. Next we have Pig. Pig in my first list, I placed her in the middle of B tier. She has really good slowdown with her power, and her dash, which was very lacking before, was buffed. But she's still in B plus tier, but she could honestly maybe even go a little bit lower. Honestly, she can maybe go a little bit lower. I highly overestimated how strong she was, because in my head, after testing, she was a bit like, it was like, okay, so she's just a worse Chucky. My ranking of her was like, it was kind of in my hubris. It was like an in-the-moment thing. I tested her in a few games and I won all of them super easily. But I felt like after my first list, I was like, maybe I was a bit biased there. Maybe that wasn't super objective. So for now, I'm gonna place her at the bottom of B plus. So it's another one of those things where it's kind of in the middle. Singularity's in the middle because he could either be way higher or way lower because he's very strong, but he's also very hard. Pig can be, she's at the near end of it because she could be a little bit higher, maybe a little bit lower, maybe a lot lower, which is why I put her near the end of B plus. Hopefully you understand. I still think after these buffs, she's quite good because she did receive a lot of buffs. Let's go over them. So let's see. First of all, she's very good. Another killer where she's very good in low ranks, which that's probably why her numbers, like her kill rates and stuff, were very high because of her trap slowdown. When she downs a survivor, you would put a trap on their head, and they don't have to remove the box. They would have to go to a box and remove the trap. Way before, she would have super inconsistent RNG. Survivors would either have to search boxes 16 times in total because 4 traps times 4 searches, 16 total, or 4 total because 4 traps, 1 search. Now she has a fixed RNG to where every survivor has to pretty much search like 2 or 3 on average, which makes it better for both sides. Ignoring low ranks, let's say your MMR is good. Her stealth is very bad. Her stealth is probably the worst in the game because she has to crouch. She crouches really slow. Even now after the buff, she still crouches really slow. And you can ambush, but before it took a long time to crouch. The ambush was pretty bad. It was a long time to charge. Whatever. After her most recent balance change, she's a lot less reliant on the crouch add-on on certain add-ons. Her power goes faster. Like it moves faster. It goes longer. You crouch faster. It has less of a cooldown. So overall, pretty major buff. But with all of this, it's still not the greatest thing. There are still a lot of loops that you can't really play around, especially because the survivor still can see you pretty easily when you're. And because of the fact that she still makes that roaring noise, there's still a telling that she's about to use it. So, a telling. I couldn't think of the word. An audio cue. So, and over time, she's gotten her, because of her RNG, her add-ons have just gotten worse. Okay, I'm sorry. So. The fact that it's not the best power, I still want to place her here. I think I can justify placing her a little bit lower, but not much lower. I think you can understand. And I think I didn't move her down as much is because ignoring the fact that her power is better, but she's not, as great as I initially said. Despite her power being better, she's still better in every way than she was before. So her traps before, like I said, with the fact that the RNG was super random, it was just bad. It could either be really good or really bad. But now that it's fixed, it's still pretty good. After her change where she can't see boxes anymore, her best add-on is probably Jigsaw's Sketch. You can't because her old add-ons for traps were better because you could go to the boxes and kind of just pressure survivors. You could force them off the box. You could interrupt them. You could constantly do all of that. But now that you can't see the box, her best add-on is probably the Sketch because it just adds 1 trap. So it takes the time that you would have and just adds an extra box. So that's an extra 2 or 3 searches to the slowdown. That's pretty significant. It also has a secondary effect where if a survivor has a trap on their head and they're doing a gen, it reveals them, or it doesn't reveal them. It shows the intensity of the gen, but that's not really anything. No one's gonna really do a gen while they have a trap on. So it's just for the fact that the 1 extra trap is an extra 2 to 3 searches. That gives you a lot more time to chase survivors, which is good because now you have your improved chase power. So with that being said, I still think she's way stronger than she was before. Honestly, I think she was C tier next to Dredge before. Honestly, maybe even next to Legion. Yeah, probably Legion, next to Legion. But now I think she's way up here. Now we have Wraith. So where do Wraith? I didn't write any notes for Wraith because he's simply put, he's here because he is so consistent. There is no bad map for Wraith. There is no map in particular that you can go to as Wraith and be like, oh wow, I immediately lost. Wraith is so consistent. He's not consistent like Doctor. He doesn't have the thing with like Doctor where he can make any one chase faster than the other. He doesn't have any like. He has good map traversal with his stealth. He is okay stealth just because of how fast he moves, and he has okay anti-loop. It's probably the worst anti-loop in the game, but it's anti-loop regardless, just because it you get a little speed boost after uncloaking, and with your lunge you move very fast. So he's just very consistent, and can always perform pretty much the same as he always would be able to. There's never any time where he's the best. There's never any time where he's the worst. There's never any situation where you can genuinely feel like you would be doing better in another situation. All situations as Wraith are pretty much the same. That being said, still not an incredible anti-loop. You still have to uncloak when you get up to a survivor. The survivors can obviously hear you and see you even while you're cloaked. So it's still not the best thing ever, but he's a bit versatile with his builds. He's just very consistent. So next is Demo. Demo's kind of like a jack. I put him right next to Wraith because he's a jack of all trades killer. Like, he's always sort of good, sort of not great. He's fine. He'll never be the worst. He's very average. He is John Killer because, well, let's just go over what he does. So first of all, he places portals. These serve as, not only do they serve as map traversal, it's probably the worst map traversal in the game, but it's still map traversal, but they also serve as info. So they can honestly be a bit of an area denial just because you can use them as info. So you can defend totems, you can defend gens, like there's even a 3-gen strat you can do that I've tried before. It's not really great, I wouldn't recommend it, but you can still do it. But that's not his main power. His main power is his shred. His shred has the same thing as Chainsaw Killer's. It can break pallets. And when you have the yellow glasses add-on, whatever they're called, Barb's glasses? I'm not entirely sure. Whatever those are, the add-on lets you break pallets even faster because you have less of a cooldown. But you can also damage survivors. The power is really good. Like, its major benefit is it has no cooldown, no wind-up. It has no wind-up at all. Like, it's a very short wind-up. It can be used extremely quickly. There's no punishment for canceling it. So most killers, when you, let's say Huntress, for example, you hit up Hatchet, and then you let it down, you're like, oh, you move really slowly. Demo doesn't do that. Demo has basically no punishment for not using his power. You can constantly fake it over and over to force out mistakes from survivors. You lose no distance at all. And it kind of forces survivors to take you to circular loops where the Demo can't really use his power. And Demo has a lot of tricks that you can use on your power that make it a bit more, well, honestly just fun and nice to use. So first of all, there's a lot of places where when there aren't invisible walls on maps, you can pretty much shred because you move so fast during your shred. As far as I'm aware, you are the fastest killer in the game besides besides Hillbilly during Overdrive during your shred. So what you do is you shred, and you can go flying, or you can bounce off of certain objects that will move you into certain other spots. So that's just a nice little thing you can do. But there's also certain spots where you can kind of hug tech with Demo to hit survivors around corners, and you have a very wide horizontal hitbox, which is even better for hug teching because it lets you hit survivors around corners fairly well. Like the only thing I'd say is there's one really big issue that a lot of killers have, kind of like Demo, where if the survivor has any sort of elevation below you, they can crouch and your hit just won't hit them. It just won't connect. So basically they'll crouch and you'll just miss outright because they're not in the center of your screen. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know the logic behind it. I don't know how it works or why. But basically, if they're like below you and they crouch, you just won't hit them. And that can make chasing a little bit of a struggle. But other than that, Demo is just he's an average. He's the most average killer with a little bit of everything: map traversal, info, chase power. He struggles against the same things other killers would struggle against: big maps, splitting up. He's just the jack of all trades, master of none. Now we have Leatherface. Leatherface has gotten just worse and worse over time. This isn't to say he's super bad now. I don't think he's bad. But to go over the things he's gotten worse at is just camping, because now we have the anti-camp measurement, defending 3 gens. Defending 3 gens is already worse over time, just because of Skull Merchant, they had the nerf 3-genning. But also, when you hook a survivor in like the middle of a 3-gen because of that anti-camp measurement, it's harder to do that now. So overall, just a lot of things. But you can still do it in endgame. And it's easier to camp there. But regardless of all of that, his chainsaw is basically a mobility tool if you can use it right. If you can use it from so far away, and you will catch up to survivors, like during loops. And you can basically force out 50-50s at pallets. You can damage multiple survivors. Obviously, you can down multiple survivors. You can, like I said, because of how fast you can move, you can catch up to them from super far away. But the biggest problem is, in order to do these things, you need add-ons. You either need a combination of the chilies and the engravings, or the mark add-ons. So, and his best build, you're pretty much always going to need Bamboozle as Bubba. So it's a bit predictable what you'll have. You'll probably have the award-winning chili with the beast marks and Bamboozle. So it's a bit predictable. He's a bit easy to play around. But he can still be fairly good in chase, and he can still end chases really quickly if you catch a survivor off guard. Like, if they hear you using your power from super far away and you catch up super unexpectedly to them, like, it can be very deceiving. Then yeah, you can definitely have your strengths. So he's not the worst killer. He's pretty predictable. You can't camp with him as well. There's just a lot of things that he can't do nearly as well as he used to be able to. Now we have Trickster. Trickster is, again, another killer that I don't really have notes for, but put simply, Trickster's just, back on what I said about Demogorgon, where he's a jack of all trades, master of none. Well, Demo is, he's not better than anyone at any one thing, but he also has everything. Like, he's a 110 movement speed killer. He has chase power. He has a little bit of movement just because his shred takes some places. And because there's that little tech I said you could do where you can jump off of a super high place and make a pretty good amount of distance. He has his teleporting as well, and he has some info with his portals. Trickster has one thing, and that's his chase power. But the thing with Trickster is he's also kind of like Demo, where he's not better than anyone at any one thing. But unlike Demo, he doesn't have everything. Demo has a little bit of everything. Trickster only has his chase power, but that chase power is still not better than anyone at anything. If you're in a super tight spot, there's probably a kit like Huntress can probably tear through health states faster than Trickster can. He can't deal with Shack very well. There's a lot of high tiles that he struggles against. There's not really many techs with him you can do. Like, honestly, he's a 115 killer now after the buff he got, so if you damn well please, you can just play him like a normal killer. But, like, they buffed him in that one PTB, they giga buffed him, and he was not received well at all, so now they nerfed him, and now he's down to where he is now. He's just a regular, he could be played like a regular killer, but his power in itself is just, it's good at places, but there's no killer that probably couldn't do it better. Or, well, there are killers that couldn't do it better, but there are killers that can do it better than Trickster. So Trickster, anything that Trickster can do, there's a killer that can do it better. Which, it just makes him not that great. Next we have Sadako. Sadako is a killer that another person disagreed with me in my comment section. They pointed out to me that I was missing out on some info. From her PTB to live, they did give her a nice buff. Before they pushed her to live, so good on them. I did completely miss that, so that's my fault. Honestly, I'm surprised I didn't notice it while I was playing, but I still don't think So in my original list, I had her in C tier because they nerfed her. She was super overtuned when she could do her map wide condemning. She was super oppressive and omnipotent, and now she just wasn't. She was back to being basically original Sadako with some minor buffs to her. Now she's back to original Sadako but with some major buffs to her, but she still has her glaring issues. She still has no counterplay to tapes. There's no risk. There's no risk to picking up a tape. There's no downside. Survivors have no, like, there's no reason not to carry a tape. And even if you get hooked, it's not that bad. And before, when you would only lock in 2 stacks, that was terrible. Now it's 3, but that still isn't enough to justify putting her much higher than this. You now have more of a movement speed burst outside of your TVs, which is good, but you still have to teleport to TVs and be around survivors. Most of the time around TVs, survivors are gonna have resources that they can do with. So even with the speed boost, it still doesn't do a whole lot. Her stealth, she kind of has like a lullaby kind of thing. So like personally, I don't think I've really ever been stealth up on by a Sadako that often. Even in like super high wall loops, where in theory it would be kind of hard, you could still kind of hear her. It's not super easy. Like it's not super easy, but you can still hear the little wind chime kind of sounding noise, the little whatever sound you want to call it. You can still hear that. She does move a bit faster while manifesting now, which is good. All of these buffs are good, which is why I brought her from the bottom of C tier to the like kind of lower end of B tier, B minus tier. I do think she's good, but just because she can condemn a survivor and insta kill them, that still takes time. Survivors have zero reason to not pick up tapes. There's no counterplay to tapes for Sadako, which I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That keeps her in check, but the fact that it doesn't exist, that still makes her bad. So with Sadako, it's kind of hard to balance her because she's either really bad or really strong. So there's no counterplay to tapes. Again, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that because that is a thing, it's not good for Sadako. The fact that she gets more of a speed boost out of her TVs, that's good, but not good enough. Survivors are still going to have resources. Survivors are still going to have ways to dodge her. And even if they get hit once, that like she has no chase power. Her stealth aspect is better than some other killers, but stealth aspects aren't enough. It's still stealth. Like it still really isn't enough to chase survivors. You have to rely on your stealth and your invisibility mind games, which are better now because they made Raiko's watch kind of base kit. Or did they just make it fully base kit? I don't remember, but they did make it better. But she still has no chase power. And the best thing is they removed the cooldown on condemning. That was probably her best change. In fact, that just made me realize that's a lot more convenient, or that's a lot bigger than I guess I initially thought. So maybe you could move her higher on the tier list, but I think that would be like the biggest number one thing that would make me move her higher is the fact that there's no cooldown on condemn now. So you can condemn, as long as you do actually manage to condemn the survivors. If you know what you're doing and you know where the TVs are going to be, you can constantly apply condemn. The fact that she has no cooldown now, I do see her going a little bit higher. And I can't believe I didn't think about that sooner. I guess I really underestimated how better that is. So yeah, she could probably move a few spots, but I don't think she would break B minus. She would probably be like maybe top of B minus. Moving on, now we have Nemesis. So starting out with Nemesis, he's so inconsistent. He's so inconsistent. The first thing is his zombies. At the start of the match, after a few seconds, zombies will spawn. There's always 2 of them. The zombies, I mean, they'll react to certain noise notifications, and when they see a survivor, they'll put up their arms and start, like, chasing them, harassing them, so you'll know. But, like, and zombies can be blinded and stunned for 20 seconds, and then they can be pallet stunned or head-on stunned, and they'll just be destroyed, and they'll respawn after a few seconds. But Zombies can either be incredible or just do nothing. They can either harass the best 2 gens on the map and constantly harass survivors, or they can just get stuck on walls and be on super big maps and harass like nothing. They'll harass a spot that no one's in. Um, like I will say that on average they do stuff. Like they aren't terrible. They aren't the worst thing ever. Ever since Night came out, the AI got a bit better, so good on the devs, but they're so inconsistent. Next you have your main power, the tentacle, where you actually control. The tentacle, it can damage survivors, and it has like an up-down hitbox. Like it starts up and then it slams down, kind of. So you can like linger it in ways. It's a weird hitbox, but it can be. There's there's some tricks behind it that can be used, but you have tiers to Nemesis. You have tier 1 where you're basically nothing. You have tier 2 where you can break pallets, and you have tier 3 where you have 1 extra meter of range and you move a little bit faster while you're holding out your tentacle. This is where his big inconsistencies come in, because on one hand, you either start the game and all the survivors are grouped up and you immediately get to tier 2 and now you're an actual killer, and while in tier 2, if survivors try to drop pallets on you super early on, it's basically redundant because, well, again, you pretty much ignore pallets, so you don't have really any downside to just breaking them. It practically feels worthless dropping pallets on a tier 2 Nemesis at the start of the game. If Nemesis, however, doesn't find multiple survivors, he only finds 1, then unless you're using Marvin's Blood add-on, he doesn't even get into tier 2 from the first chase. And sometimes maybe you do find 1 survivor, you infect them, you go try to find another one, but maybe they get hit by a zombie and the zombie will infect them, but they don't. That doesn't give you any infection rate. So now you're going to have to hit them twice while they're infected, which gives you not as many points to infection as if they weren't infected would. So now you'd have to hit them once, hit them twice. You still wouldn't even be in tier 2, and then you'd have to go hit a couple zombies, and then you'd be in tier 2 finally. So the strength of Nemesis just comes down to how fast you get into tier 2. Again, I'd say on average, most of your games, if you play it right and you know what you're doing, you can pretty much get into tier 2 fairly fast. But sometimes you just can't, and sometimes it's just slower than you'd want it to be. But if you do manage to get into tier 2, he can be incredibly impressive. Up close, he's very hard to deal with, because you pretty much can't avoid his power at windows or pallets. You pretty much can't dodge him. So now we have Knight. Oh my god. First of all, I hate this killer, but let's talk about Skull Merchant for a second. So, you guys know, as I explained, Skull Merchant is better because of how many tiny things she has that adds up that let her overpower survivors. Knight is the reverse of that. Knight has so many tiny bugs that make him worse and feel infuriating to play. Now, personally, I played him a lot in the first week that he came out. I realized that he sucked and he was boring and I did not like playing him. I've played him once since then, and that was like a random time a couple months ago. So I've played him like, I haven't played him that much, but I still know that his bugs persist. First bug, he has, if the survivor drops a pallet on your guard, you'll get stunned. Sometimes your guards will just have terrible AI and they won't chase the survivors properly. There's just so many tiny things and bugs that will come together to just make playing Knight feel awful. And he's super add-on dependent, so he's another one of those killers that just has to use the exact same build every single game, which makes it easier to face him because survivors will know what build you're using. So overall, he's just not good, and I'm sorry that I can't say more about him, and I don't know what they can do to fix him. I have a lot of ideas for most killers, but I don't have any idea for what they can do tonight, because I want him to be better, I want him to be fixed, but if they fix him and make him not a bad killer, now we have the issue. Right now, he's a bad but really boring killer. If they makes him better, we'll have the issue of him being a good killer but really boring still. So I don't know what they can do to make him good and not boring while still keeping up with his guardian companion or whatever. So I don't know. Now we have Dredge. Oh god, here we go. So Dredge was the other killer that one dude who was talking about Sadako disagreed with. Again, if you're watching, hi, how are you? Dredge, in my opinion, is... So, first of all, I want to emphasize how I put him here because he's not good, aka the C tier, where bad killers are at, you know? Not good killers. The reason he's in C tier and not just flat out D tier though is because Dredge has the potential to be so oppressive. He has the potential to be a monster. First of all, a lot of people have been, I don't know who started this, like I don't know who pointed this out and then started a trend of people saying it, but I've been seeing a lot of people point out how people with like bad resolutions and bad monitors struggle against this Nightfall, which I do agree with. That is true. When I thought about it, if you don't have a super bright monitor, Nightfall can probably be a nightmare for you to deal with. So there's that. Dredge has some pretty mean add-ons, and he has a lot of build variety that also allows him to stay unpredictable too. So there's that. And then beyond all that, though, what does he have? So on the maps that he's good, like Midwich, for example, he has the potential to just be crazy. There's lockers everywhere, and his Remnant, the power, is so good. It's so good on every loop there. So let's go over his actual power. So Remnant, that's where you leave like a little shadow behind. You move a little bit slower, and you can teleport back to it. So it's a bit of an anti-loop power, where you can get hit. You can bait survivors to run into you. You teleport back to it, and you get guaranteed hits that you wouldn't get otherwise. But since the fact that you move slower means that you're not always going to get a hit. Survivors can sometimes just hold W to other loops, and even if you do teleport to the Remnant and make the right read, there's a couple of times where it'll still take a couple extra seconds to actually get a hit, which could be really bad for the Dredge. So the Remnant is not a bad power. It's very consistent. It's good and consistent, but it's not great. It's not amazing. It's not, it's not the best thing in the world. It's pretty it's pretty below average compared to other killer chase powers, but it's consistent. What's not consistent is his lockers. He can teleport to lockers, which is a very good map traversal ability, but he is so map dependent. If you're on a map with a lot of lockers, that could be good for Dredge. So like I said, on Midwich, all the loops are good for his Remnant, and there are so many lockers that are good for him to teleport to. But if you're on a map with little to no lockers, sometime, like on RPD, for example, there's like 2 or 3 gens that you just can't defend. There's no lockers around the gen, and you just can't defend them. So you have to walk up to them. But guess what? Even if you're undetectable, you can't stealth as Dredge, because he has a audible, which basically means like they can tell how far or how close you are, and directional noise that constantly follows him. It's like a whooshing noise that constantly follows him. He's literally a tornado because it's constantly following you always, no matter what. Even if you're undetectable, you have that loud ass directional noise, and so regular mind games don't work. You have to use your Remnant. And so the locker teleporting, again, he has potential to be crazy, and because he has so much build diversity, he can be pretty unpredictable. But if you're on a map that doesn't have good locker spawns, there's nothing. You are so bad. You are one of the worst killers in the game. You are Myers level. But despite what everyone says, a lot of people say that Dredge is super bad. A lot of people probably like to over-exaggerate how bad Dredge is. Most of those people, I honestly think that they're just taking things that other streamers have said. I don't know what it is. Dead by Daylight players are weird. Dead by Daylight players will take something that a streamer says and just act like it's gospel. Like, oh, well, the popular streamer who has a lot of time in the game said it. So if you say something that's against that, that's wrong. And I have a lot of time in this game, but I have zero way to prove that because it's on 2 separate accounts. 80% of my hours were on PS4, but I don't have my PlayStation anymore, and you can't really show your hours on PlayStation. So if I told you how many hours I actually had in the game, I would have no way of proving it. So there's literally no point, right? So because I'm not a super popular streamer, and because I have no way to prove that I actually have a lot of time on this game, you guys will not really, if I say something that goes against something a streamer has said before, you won't believe me. You won't listen to me, and you'll just think that I'm wrong. So, but that's my opinion on Dredge. He's very inconsistent, and I get that a lot of people think he's bad, and I get that a lot of people think he's consistently bad, but on situations where he's strong, he's strong. And because he has such build diversity, you have the potential to counter other people's builds. Let's say you're facing survivors with a healing build and you're using an anti-heal build. Again, because you're so diverse in your builds, there's potential where you can have some lucky games where your build just is so good against theirs. So, very inconsistent, but because he's inconsistent, he has potential to be good or really bad. But I have him in C tier because although I think at his strongest he's like higher than Singularity, he's more weak than strong. Just because I say he can be strong doesn't mean I think he is strong. That's why I have him in C- tier. Like the top of C- tier because of how strong he can be, but because on average he's more weak than strong, I would put him here. That's like 10 tiers that he skipped because again, I do think he is way weaker most of the time. Next we have Clown. Clown is another just average Joe killer. He has the same weaknesses. He deals like the meta builds that survivors run are very good against Clown. Super big maps are very bad for Clown because he is very poor map traversal. Splitting up is very bad against Clown because he has really no map pressure. All he has is the ability to get a lot of hits a lot of the time because he has his yellow bottles that speed him up and his purple bottles that slow survivors down. He's very, very good at getting hits around tiles, but that's his strength. That ends there. And the fact that his bottles do nothing but slow you down, there's some times where you're still safe because you could just still vault windows, albeit slower, but you could still vault windows and pallets and stuff. And pallets, you don't even vault slower. Pallets, you vault at normal speed. Unlike Pinhead, where you're forced to slow vault them. So Clown, he suffers the same thing that most killers suffer against, if not more so, and it's the fact that his biggest strength just lets you get hits. He has to use his entire power. Like, I get it. Killers have to use their power to get hits, but the Clown has to set up 2 bottles in order to barely get a hit, and it's a regular M1, so you still have to go through all the cooldown, you still have to go through all of that, so it's still a regular cooldown. And the fact that you have 6 bottles, which is better than the 4 that he used to have, but you still have to reload. And the fact that you're super slow while reloading. All those things just come together to make him not a super potent killer. He has to use super meta builds to keep up. So, just a very average killer, just the most average killer ever. Next is Ghostface. Ghostface is, again, like Clown. He's a 115 killer, and he doesn't really have any chase power. His power is to go into stealth and to stalk survivors and insta-down them. So that's why he's not quite in D tier, because in theory, he literally doesn't have a power at all. His power is to stealth and insta-down survivors, but he has no way of actually hitting the survivor other than with an M1. So if the survivor is good at looping, good fucking luck. But he's in C tier because at the very least he can stealth and can get sneak attacks and he can stalk survivors to insta-down them, which can give you some leverage at times if you are able to get the insta-down, and because not every survivor you're going to face is a god tier looper, so more often than not you are going to be able to get it down. But the thing is, you don't need to be a god tier looper in order to loop a Ghostface. You don't really have to, like, any average survivor can just pre-drop a shit ton of pallets against a Ghostface. So you really have to play super well in order to play well as Ghostface. So he's just, his power lets you insta-down, but you have no way of enforcing that insta-down. So I don't think he's that great. Legion is, it's kind of like Ghostface, where you have the ability to injure survivors very easily, very, very easily. But what do you have after that? So Ghostface can insta-down survivors from healthy. Legion can basically insta-down survivors because they're going to be injured a lot. But again, Ghostface with his insta-down and Legion with, downing injured survivors. What does Legion have to actually down the killer? He has no power. Or to down the survivor. He has no power. The best he can do is hope that he hits 4 survivors, which is not possible in large maps more often than not, and then get the 5th hit and just down someone. But, so beyond injuring survivors very easily and very quickly, which they can still heal, by the way. It's not like a plague where they're forced to stay injured or give her incredible power. They can still heal. It just, it's super easy to get them injured. But again, beyond that, what can you do? It's not even like Ghostface, where stealthing and crouching make him a little bit stronger in chase. Like, stealthing and crouching can be used in chase a little bit better. Legion literally has nothing. He doesn't have any form of innate stealth, nothing. No dash, no crouching, nothing. Other than that, he's just a regular M1 killer, 115 movement speed. The best thing about him is he's very versatile with his perks. He can use just about every perk in the game pretty well. Okay, now we have Myers. Myers is, just take Ghostface, but, Myers has to go through tiers. So, Myers starts out at tier 1. He's a slower killer with no lunge. Then he has to stalk, which can be sometimes hard and delayed if the survivor is smart. and then he goes into tier 2. Now he's a regular killer with a slightly smaller, a pretty smaller tear radius, a slightly faster vault, a regular lunge, regular 115 movement speed. Excuse me. Then you go into tier 3 after stalking survivors for even longer than tier 1 to 2. Now you have a normal terror radius, still normal movement speed, you insta down survivors, you have a longer lunge, and you have a faster vault. So once you actually get to tier 3, you are a bit more lethal than Ghostface. But it's the fact that it takes so much longer to get to that stage than Ghostface. Ghostface immediately starts the game, can immediately go into stealth, and move at normal speeds, and immediately start chasing survivors. There's no setup. With Myers, you have to get out of tier 1, and then you have to get out of tier 2 in order to get to that state. So, in theory, Ghostface versus Myers, who wins the 1v1, technically it would be a Myers if the Myers were always in tier 3, but he's not always in tier 3. So, and once you get tier 3, it ends after a certain amount of time, unless you're using super strong add-ons. So Myers has very powerful add-ons that I don't like. So I don't even like Myers that much. But yeah, that's the most I can say about him. Trapper has a similar problem where he has to go. You start the game with 2 traps, 3 if you're using the bag add-on, and you have to place your traps. It takes 2.5 seconds, or is it 2? I don't know. I think it's 2.5 or something. Faster again with some add-ons, and then you have to place a trap, you have to go pick up another, you have to place a trap, you have to go pick up another, and your traps don't all spawn in the same spot. Like, they spawn sporadically around the map. Sometimes they'll be like behind you. There will usually be 2 like around you, and you can usually create a path to make sure you pick up as many traps as you can without going too far out of your way. But like half of your traps will spawn on the other side of the map where the survivors are, and you'll have 0 like you can't just go grab those and then go back to your place to set up. So you have to kind of set up, and then if you can go pick up other traps as you chase other survivors, but like it's just the fact that you have such a bad early game. So it's kind of like a Hag where you have a super bad early game, but Hag has all of your traps. They're replaceable too. So if you run out of your trap placements, you can place more. So excuse me, you can but as Trapper, you have to go pick up your traps by yourself. You have to place them, and they're not like a Hag where they have like a range to them. They have to actually step in your trap. So even the power itself will just on top of you having a super slow start, on top of the fact that killers by default already start the game by losing, like there's no really delay that the killer has at the start. So Corrupt Intervention is basically a must-have on Trapper. And the fact that even when you get all of your traps set, the power itself won't always pay off. Like sometimes survivors will just avoid the loop. Sometimes survivors will just they can disarm your traps. There's a lot of maps nowadays that don't really have grass, and if they have grass, it's super thin, like bad grass where the survivors can see the traps, so they can either avoid them or disarm them, even if they didn't see you place it. Survivors can use maps, obviously, to see your traps. Again, the time that it takes to set up the traps, just all of that put together just makes Trapper not a good killer. For some reason, I had 2 people in my comment section say that Trapper was not that bad of a killer, even though he is objectively a bad killer. If we wanted to be subjective about this, Trapper is my best killer because my Trapper is by far my most played killer, and I win most of my games. Except now, honestly, I don't even win most of my games. I win a lot of them. I probably win most of my games, but I don't win. It's not like what you would think. It's not like 80% of my games. It's probably like barely breaking 60 because Trapper is so bad. There's some maps where you just can't use your power at all. And again, even if you can, like, even on the maps where you can, they don't always pay off. So Trapper is just objectively bad. There's no way you can justify him being good. The only way you can justify him being good is if you use the Trapper Stack add-on, which completely takes away the time that it takes to pick up your traps at the start. And you can use your traps a little bit more aggressively. Trapper has good add-ons, but it's still the fact that his bear traps can still be disarmed, and they can still just not work. But that alone doesn't push him into any higher than this. Now, oh god, we have Freddy. Now, Freddy is the worst killer in the game just because of the fact that I just talked about how Trapper has his Trapper Sack, which can be used to make a pretty mean build, and Myers has his Tomb Piece and some other add-ons that can also be used to make a pretty mean build. What does Freddy have? Well, first of all, Like Myers and Trapper, Freddy has a terrible power. You either use Dream Snares, which hardly do anything, or Dream Pallets, which literally do nothing. Like, if survivors are paying attention, they really don't do anything. Because they're going to know which pallets are fake pallets and not use them. So his power is teleporting to gens and kicking gens with gen perks. Beyond that, his add-ons do nothing. He has no good add-ons. His best add-on is probably the one that just lets you teleport faster based on how many survivors are asleep. He has no good add-ons. None. His add-ons are terrible. So, along with having a really bad power, along with having essentially no power other than just teleporting to gens and kicking them, along with all of that, he has no add-ons that make his power better. That would, like, take his already bad power and transform it into something that could be mean, could be good, could be whatever. He has nothing. He's a standard M1 killer. The only thing he has is, like, there are some ways you could play around the fact that he is a lullaby and, like, no tear radius or whatever. But even then, not really. He's so bad. He's so bad. There's no way to justify making him or calling him any better than the worst killer in the game. No good add-ons, no good power, and no, like, chase power. His snares hardly do anything. Clown does that better. Clown does Freddy's main job better. So, in my opinion, the worst killer in the game. Absolutely nothing. Yeah. I'm gonna go edit this and then get it posted. Let me know how you guys feel about this one. I think I did a pretty good job at explaining this one, and I think this one is probably my best out of the other two. Again, I'm not gonna post something like this for a while because I don't want to seem like I already do seem like I'm just trying to milk this content since they are my most viewed videos. But regardless, take care. Goodbye.